The Grand Conclave on Citadel Epsilon was a monument to galactic optimism, a swirling, crystalline space station where the gravity plates hummed in 1,000 different frequencies to accommodate 1,000 different biologies. It was a place where beings of pure energy mingled with silicon-based behemoths, and where delicate insectoids navigated hallways alongside lumbering, 4-ton gastropods. It was, in theory, a testament to peaceful coexistence. In practice, it was a cosmic garage sale of anxiety, and today's main event was the Cathar trade negotiation, which was going about as well as trying to teach a supernova to knit. High Counselor Zorp, a being that resembled a sentient, 7-foot-tall lava lamp, shimmered with intellectual frustration. Its gelatinous form pulsed with soft violets and irritated crimsons, a light show of pure condescension directed at its companion. I simply cannot fathom their inclusion, Zorp projected, its thoughts sliding directly into the mind of General Kalen of the Vex. The Vex were a warrior species, all sharp angles and chitinous plates, and Kalen was the sharpest of them all. He stood on 4 powerful legs, his 2 upper arms crossed over a chest that looked like it could deflect small asteroids. The organics treaty of the 4th cycle is quite clear, Counselor, Kalen rumbled, his voice a low grinding of rocks. Any species achieving starflight and demonstrating non-genocidal tendencies for at least 5 standard cycles is granted provisional council status. The humans qualify. Barely, his tone suggested that the non-genocidal part was still very much on probation. But what do they contribute? Zorp swirled, a deep, contemplative indigo. Their technology is derivative, cobbled together from crashed vessels and frantic reverse engineering. Their physiology is an exercise in mediocrity. No natural armor, no redundant organs of any significance, no specialized limbs for combat or manipulation. They are soft. They are slow. Their primary sensory organs are ridiculously front-facing, giving them the predator awareness of a stunned groxworm. Kalen let out a short burst of static that passed for a vexed chuckle. They are persistence predators, or so their own archives claim. They run their prey to exhaustion. A laughable strategy in a galaxy of energy weapons and grav propulsion. We once observed a human military training exercise. They marched for 30 kilometers carrying heavy packs, then celebrated by setting organic matter on fire and consuming it. It was perplexing. Perplexing is a generous term, Zorp projected. Their psychological profile is even more baffling. They oscillate between crippling empathy and breathtaking savagery with no discernible logic. They form intense, illogical social bonds. Yet their history is a litany of internecine warfare over trivialities like resource distribution, philosophical disagreements, and the proper way to pronounce certain words. They are walking paradoxes. Fragile, yet stubborn. Sentimental, yet brutal. The 2 of them were observing the main concourse through a one-way pane of crystallized xenon. Below, delegates and their aides scurried about. A Xylosian diplomat, a being of living wood, was carefully being watered by its attendant. A pair of Gnarl, whose entire species communicated through interpretive dance, were having a heated argument that looked suspiciously like the tango. And then, they saw him. He was a human. His name was Jake, and he was the newly assigned junior cultural attaché to the human delegation. He looked exactly as unimpressive as the galactic consensus expected. He was of average height for his species, with a body that suggested a fondness for carbohydrates and a deep-seated aversion to strenuous activity. His dark hair was a little messy, and he was wearing a standard-issue diplomatic uniform that seemed to have been designed for someone with slightly different shoulder proportions. He was squinting at a datapad, his brow furrowed in a way that didn't suggest deep thought so much as mild confusion, as if he was trying to remember where he'd parked his shuttle. There, Zorp pulsed, a flicker of pure, academic disdain. Behold, the apex of their evolution. He appears to be lost. Kalen made another grinding noise. His posture is atrocious. No tactical awareness. His head is down, his attention consumed by that device. An adolescent screehawk could pick him off from a kilometer away. My young are born with more situational awareness than that. Jake finally looked up from his datapad, his expression brightening as he spotted a sign for the station's nutrient paste dispenser. He gave a small, hopeful smile and began walking towards it, weaving through the alien crowd with an unhurried, almost meandering gait. He nearly bumped into a Praxian ambassador, a towering creature of crystalline facets, and offered a clumsy, apologetic wave. The Praxian simply rotated a few of its facets in his direction, a gesture of supreme indifference, before gliding away. You see, Zorp's light shimmered. They are galactic clutter. They offer no strategic advantage, no profound wisdom, no unique resources. They are simply here, a cosmic accident that stumbled upon the hyperlanes. Keeping them on the council is an act of charity, not strategy. Kalen's mandibles clicked in agreement. Their military is a joke. They call their elite warriors special forces. Our Vex regulars could crush them without breaking a sweat. We have 4 arms, Counselor. 4. And claws that can shear through durasteel. They have opposable thumbs. He sounded personally offended by the biological inequity of it all. They continued to watch as Jake procured a small tube of beige nutrient paste. He squeezed a bit onto his finger, tasted it, and made a face of profound disappointment. It was the face of a being who had just experienced a minor but deeply personal tragedy. He sighed, a sound far too small to be heard through the xenon pane, and looked around for a disposal unit. This, to the 2 most powerful figures on the station, was humanity in a nutshell. Soft, slow, easily confused, and perpetually disappointed by the universe's failure to cater to its bizarrely specific desires. They were harmless. A species of cosmic tourists who had somehow wandered into the halls of power and were now just trying to find the snack bar. And that fundamental misunderstanding was about to cost the Cthar Empire dearly. The first sign that the day was about to take a sharp turn into chaos was a low, guttural roar that echoed up from the negotiation chambers. It was a sound that vibrated through the deck plates, a primeval bellow of pure, unadulterated rage. It was the sound of Cthar diplomacy reaching its final, inevitable stage. Alarms began to shriek, bathing the pristine corridors in strobing red light. A synthesized voice, calm and utterly unhelpful, began announcing a code mauve security alert in 12 different languages. Doors slammed shut, sectioning off the citadel. The casual bustle of the concourse devolved into a panicked scramble. Zorp and Kalen were already moving. Kalen's 4 legs carried him with a speed that belied his bulk, his upper arms reaching for the heavy plasma repeater slung across his back. Zorp flowed alongside him, a river of anxious light, its form constricting with psychic tension. They reached the observation deck overlooking the Cthar negotiation chamber, just as the station's security forces, a squad of heavily armored Vex regulars, were taking up positions outside the main door. The scene inside was stark. The chamber was in ruins. The solid granite negotiation table had been snapped in half, its 2 pieces thrown to opposite ends of the room. Data pads and translators were smashed into glittering dust. In the center of the destruction stood Forlag the Unbreakable, the Cthar's chosen representative. Forlag was a monument to evolutionary spite. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body a terrifying landscape of thick muscle, leathery hide, and jagged bone spurs that grew naturally from his joints. His face was a predator's nightmare, all tusks and mandible, with small, black eyes burning with savage intelligence. And in one of his massive, 3-fingered hands, he held the lead Vex negotiator, Ambassador Torvin, by the throat. Torvin's chitinous legs kicked feebly, his own formidable strength nothing against the Cthar's raw power. The Vex hegemony will cede the Trivian asteroid belt. Forlag roared, his voice like an avalanche. You will pay reparations for your perceived insults, and you will deliver to me the head of General Kalen on a platter of polished iridium. These are my terms. They are not negotiable. Kalen, watching from the observation deck, let out a growl that shook the xenon pane. That dishonorable filth. To lay hands on a diplomat. He raised his plasma repeater, but the Vex security commander held up a hand, shaking his head. We cannot get a clean shot, General, the commander transmitted. The hostage is blocking any vital target. Forlag's bone armor will deflect any peripheral hits. We fire, the ambassador dies. Zorp pulsed a frantic, nauseating yellow. His demands are insane. The Trivian belt contains our primary listening post for the Outer Rim. Ceding it would be strategic suicide. This is not a negotiation. It is a declaration of war. Panic was a tangible thing in the command center. The best military minds of the Vex and the sharpest intellects of the Lumina were frozen. They had no move. Forlag had created a perfect stalemate. He was too strong to be subdued non-lethally, too well-armored and too well-positioned to be taken out from a distance. Any aggressive action would result in the death of the hostage and an immediate, catastrophic war with the Cthar Empire, a conflict the galaxy was ill-prepared for. They were trapped. And then, a new figure entered the chaotic scene. It was Jake. He had wandered down the corridor, drawn by the commotion, still holding his tube of disappointing nutrient paste. He'd been bypassed by the security lockdown, his clearance level too low to even register as a priority. He now stood at the edge of the cordon, peering into the chamber with an expression of mild curiosity. He took in the scene. The screaming, 8-foot-tall rage monster, the gasping hostage, the smashed room, the heavily armed soldiers in a standoff. He blinked slowly. Then he sighed. It wasn't a sigh of fear or panic. It was a sigh of profound weariness. The kind of sigh a man gives when he's just settled onto the couch and realizes he left the remote in the kitchen. It was the sigh of someone who has been presented with an inconvenient, but ultimately manageable, problem. General Kalen saw him on the monitor. What is that human doing? Get him out of there. He's a civilian, he bellowed at the security commander. Before the commander could react, Jake did something that defied all known galactic protocols for survival. He squeezed under the security cordon, straightened his slightly too big uniform, and started walking into the negotiation chamber. He still had the nutrient paste in his hand. The Vex guards were too stunned to move. They were trained to deal with threats, with warriors, with assassins. They were not trained to deal with a soft, slow-moving creature that was calmly walking towards a situation that had paralyzed the entire station's command structure. It didn't compute. Human, halt. The commander finally managed to shout. That is a hostile zone. Jake glanced back, gave a small, polite smile, and a little wave. It's fine, he said, his voice shockingly calm in the tense air. I'll just be a minute. And he kept walking. Inside the observation deck, Zorp's form was flickering like a dying bulb. What is its logic? Is it a sacrificial ritual? A primitive attempt to appease the aggressor? My databases contain nothing on this behavior. Kalen was simply staring, his mandibles hanging slightly open. The human was an idiot. A suicidal, blundering fool. He was going to get himself torn into small, soft pieces, and it was going to be messy. Forlag noticed him. The Cthar's rage had been a focused, burning sun, directed entirely at the Vex. Now, this new thing diverted his attention. He squinted his small, black eyes at the approaching human. The creature was small, unarmed, and smelled faintly of processed yeast and anxiety. It was about as threatening as a damp towel. What is this? Forlag boomed, his voice shaking the dust from the ceiling. Have the Vex send me a snack? A soft morsel to crush before I crush their ambassador. He gave Torvin a little shake for emphasis. Jake stopped about 15 feet away. He looked Forlag up and down, then glanced at the gasping ambassador Torvin. He put a hand on his hip. Honestly, Jake said, his voice conversational. The theatrics are a bit much, don't you think? I mean, we get it. You're big, you're angry. It's very impressive. But did you really have to break the table? That's coming out of your delegation's security deposit, you know. Silence. Complete, total, and utter silence fell over the chamber, the observation deck, and the security cordon. The only sound was the faint, desperate rasping of Ambassador Torvin trying to breathe. Forlag stared. Kalen stared. Zorp's light froze mid-pulse. They had all expected screaming, pleading, or perhaps a sudden, foolish charge. They had not expected administrative chiding. You dare speak to me? Forlag finally stammered, his rage momentarily short-circuited by sheer, unadulterated confusion. Well, yeah, Jake said, taking another casual step forward. That's sort of the point of diplomacy, isn't it? Talking. This whole shouting and hostage-taking thing is really more of a second-date activity, in my experience. You're coming on a bit strong. He gestured with the nutrient paste tube. Look, I get it. Negotiations are frustrating. It's like trying to assemble IKEA furniture with the instructions in a language you don't speak. You get angry. You want to throw the little wooden dowels across the room. It's natural. I will tear the flesh from your bones. Forlag roared, trying to get back on script. But the rage felt hollow now. The human wasn't reacting correctly. Prey was supposed to be scared. This little creature was acting like he was a parent dealing with a toddler's tantrum in the cereal aisle. "See, that's exactly what I'm talking about," Jake said, shaking his head with a look of mock disappointment. He was only a few feet away now. Threats of physical violence. It's so uncreative. Have you considered using your words? Tell me what's really bothering you. Did someone not get their nap today? Is the ambient lighting too harsh? Every instinct in Forlag's warrior brain was screaming at him. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of this creature was an insult to his very existence. He was Forlag the Unbreakable, conqueror of 10 systems, the victor of 1,000 duels. He would not be patronized by this soft, squishy thing. With a final, definitive roar, he tossed Ambassador Torvin aside. The vexed diplomat crashed into a wall and slumped to the floor, gasping but alive. Forlag's full attention was now on Jake. He raised a hand the size of a small shuttle, claws extended, and swung it in an arc designed to vaporize the human where he stood. Finally, Kalen muttered in the observation deck, a grim sense of inevitability settling over him. The blow was impossibly fast, a blur of gray hide and black claws. It carried enough force to punch through the hull of a starship. And Jake didn't even try to dodge it. Instead, he moved forward into the attack. It was a subtle, economical shift of weight, a dancer's move, not a fighter's. As the giant arm swept towards him, he raised his own hand, the one holding the datapad he'd been squinting at earlier. He didn't try to block the blow. That would have been like trying to stop a landslide with a dinner plate. He just touched it. His datapad, held by the edge, made contact with the inside of Forlag's wrist at a precise, almost delicate angle. At the same moment, the fingers of his other hand tapped a spot just below Forlag's elbow. The taps were light, almost casual. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Forlag's roar of rage died in his throat, replaced by a high-pitched shriek of shock and agony. A jolt of pure, white-hot fire shot up his arm. His entire limb, from claw tip to shoulder, went completely, instantly numb. The muscles seized and then went slack, rendered inert. The unstoppable blow faltered, the arm dropping uselessly to his side like a slab of dead meat. The Kthar stared at his limp arm in disbelief. It was still attached, but it refused to obey him. It was just there, a heavy, useless appendage. Before that disbelief could curdle back into rage, Jake was moving again. He flowed past Forlag's now useless arm in a smooth, continuous motion. He wasn't a warrior. He was a force of nature, like water flowing around a rock. He grabbed a trailing vine from a large, decorative pot plant that had somehow survived the room's destruction. In one fluid movement, he looped the vine around Forlag's left ankle, braced his foot, and pulled. It wasn't a feat of strength. It was a masterpiece of leverage and biomechanics. Forlag the Unbreakable, a being who could wrestle battle tanks to a standstill, found his own immense weight and forward momentum used against him. His single remaining point of stability was gone. He crashed to the floor with a thunderous boom that shook the entire deck. The 8-foot-tall behemoth lay sprawled on the ground, dazed and disoriented. Before he could even think to rise, Jake was there. He placed one foot on the side of Forlag's thick neck, just behind the jawbone. He applied no pressure. The foot was just there, a quiet, undeniable statement of dominance. Checkmate. The entire, galaxy-shaking confrontation, from the first step into the room to the final, silent victory, had taken less than 10 seconds. Jake looked down at the fallen Kthar champion. He adjusted his glasses, which had slipped slightly down his nose during the maneuver. "Now," he said, his voice still infuriatingly calm and reasonable. "I believe you had some concerns about the Trivian asteroid belt. Why don't you tell me all about them?" The debriefing room was a study in stunned silence. The air was thick with unspoken questions and shattered worldviews. General Kalen stood rigid in one corner, his 4 arms locked tightly across his chest. He hadn't moved in 10 minutes. High Counselor Zorp hovered in the center of the room, its usual kaleidoscope of colors replaced by a uniform, muted gray, the shade of a dying star. Ambassador Torvin, freshly treated for minor throat abrasions, sat at the table, occasionally touching his neck as if to confirm it was still attached. And then there was Jake. He was sitting opposite Torvin, sipping a cup of what the station's replicator insisted was Earth coffee. Dark roast. He took a sip, grimaced, and added 3 more packets of sugar substitute. "This stuff is dreadful," he announced to the silent room. "It tastes like someone filtered hot water through a sad robot's memory banks." Zorp finally stirred, its form pulsing a weak, questioning blue. "Human Jake." It projected, its thoughts slow and tentative. "An explanation is required. The maneuver you executed, the knowledge you possessed, it is not in any Federation database on human capabilities. You neutralized a Cthar blood champion, species designated as Class A threats. You did so without a weapon. You did so casually." Kalen's voice was a low growl, but it lacked its usual confident edge. It was frayed, uncertain. "The nerve clusters. Forlag's arm. Our finest xenobiologists have spent cycles trying to map Cthar physiology. We believe their nervous system was entirely internal, protected by bone and sinew." "How did you know?" Jake took another sip of his awful coffee and sighed, setting the cup down. He leaned back in his chair, the picture of a man about to explain something tedious but necessary, like how to properly fill out a tax form. "All right, look," he began. "First off, you guys have a fundamental misunderstanding about what a human is. You look at us, you see soft skin, no claws, no obvious armor. You run our atmospheric data and see a nitrogen-oxygen mix that's pretty standard. You see a Class G star, a temperate climate. You label Earth a garden world and file us under mostly harmless." He paused, letting that sink in. "Earth is not a garden world," he said, his voice losing its casual tone and taking on a quiet intensity. "It's a death world. It's a Class 12, hyper-lethal, planetary-scale meat grinder, and it has been trying to kill us since the first single-celled organism crawled out of the primordial soup. You just don't see it because you're looking at it from the outside." He held up a hand, ticking off points on his fingers. "Let's start with gravity. Your standard is about 0.8 g. Ours is 1. That doesn't sound like much, but it means every single thing on our planet is 25% stronger, tougher, and more resilient than you think it is, just to stand up. Our trees, our animals, us. We live our entire lives in a crushing force field that you'd find tiring after a few hours. Then there's the biosphere," he continued, warming to his topic. "Your apex predators? Forlag is a good example. Big, strong, aggressive. On Earth, we have things like him. We call them bears. And we have crocodiles, which are armored killing machines that haven't needed to evolve in 60 million years. We have sharks. We have venomous snakes that can kill you with a single bite, tiny spiders whose neurotoxins can liquefy your organs, and insects. Oh, God, the insects," he shuddered theatrically. "Swarms of them. Things that drink your blood, lay eggs in your skin, or just sting you for the sheer hell of it. And that's before we even get to the microscopic level. Our planet is saturated with trillions of bacteria and viruses that are constantly evolving new ways to kill us. We call it getting the flu. Your immune systems would collapse in about 30 seconds. Zorp shimmered, a wave of nauseated green washing through its form. Kalen's mandibles clicked nervously. "So, we're born into a world where everything, from the air we breathe to the ground we walk on, is actively trying to murder us. And what do? We get stubborn. We don't have claws, so we sharpen rocks. We don't have armor, so we learn to use the skins of tougher animals. We're not the strongest or the fastest, so we became the smartest. And more importantly, we became the most bloody-minded, persistent creatures in the known universe." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Kalen's. "You mentioned our persistence hunting strategy was laughable. General, you misunderstand. We didn't just run our prey to exhaustion. We ran it to death. We, a species of soft, bipedal apes, would single out an animal 4 times our size and just follow it. For hours. For days. Through blistering heat and freezing nights. We would just keep coming, a slow, inevitable, intelligent death that you couldn't fight, couldn't escape, and couldn't reason with. We weaponized patience. We turned endurance into a killing tool. What you saw in that room wasn't some secret martial art," Jake explained. "It was the result of a million years of that mindset. Forlag was big and strong. He was a sprinter. I just needed to be smarter and more patient. The nerve cluster thing? I got bored last week and read a Cthar medical file that was supposedly fully redacted. Your sensors missed a footnote in a diagram on subcutaneous tissue regeneration. It took me about an hour to cross-reference it with their skeletal structure and find two major nerve junctions with minimal protection. It wasn't genius. It was just curiosity. We're a curious species. We like taking things apart to see how they work. Machines, societies, people. He gestured towards Ambassador Torvin. His whole performance? The roaring, the demands, breaking the table? That wasn't a warrior's rage. It was a temper tantrum. I used to be a kindergarten teacher. I've seen that exact behavior 1,000 times. The body language is identical. He was overwhelmed, frustrated, and lashing out to feel in control. You all saw a terrifying warlord. I saw a 5-year-old who'd been told he couldn't have any more cookies before dinner. The silence in the room was now so profound it felt like a physical weight. Zorp's light was a dim, horrified violet. Kalen looked like he was going to be sick. The Vex general, a being who prided himself on his tactical genius, realized he had been trying to counter a battleship with military strategy, while the human had simply unplugged its power cord. You are all like this, Ambassador Torvin whispered, his voice hoarse. Jake smiled, a friendly, disarming expression that suddenly seemed profoundly terrifying. Oh no, I'm one of the calm ones. I taught kindergarten, remember? Patience is my specialty. You see, you guys have been looking at our military, our special forces, and laughing. You're making a classic mistake. You're judging the shark by its ability to climb a tree. The thing you should be scared of isn't our soldiers, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. It's our regular people. Our doctors, who spend their lives fighting things that would make your xenobiologists sterilize a planet. Our engineers, who build structures that can withstand whether you'd classify as an extinction-level event. Our parents, who can function on 2 hours of sleep for a decade while raising small, screaming, suicidal versions of themselves. I'm just a diplomat, an attaché. My job is to be polite. And I took down your biggest nightmare with a houseplant and a datapad because he was being a bit of a git. He stood up and stretched, his joints popping softly. Being underestimated is the single greatest tactical advantage in the history of the universe. And we, as a species, are masters of it. We look soft, we act clumsy, we get confused by your fancy technology. And you all buy it. Every single time. You write us off, you don't pay attention, you leave your medical files improperly redacted. And we just keep walking. Patiently. Persistently. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the control panel. He looked back at the 3 stunned, silent aliens. Their entire perception of the galactic order had been irrevocably shattered. They no longer saw a harmless, primitive race. They saw a species of camouflaged apex predators, forged in a crucible they couldn't even comprehend, who had hidden their true nature behind a mask of utter mediocrity. They saw a monster that had learned to smile. Anyway, Jake said cheerfully, his demeanor snapping back to that of a slightly lost tourist. This has been fun, but I'm going to be late for the orientation on galactic trade tariffs, and I hear the snacks are top-notch. He gave them another one of his small, polite waves. You all have a great day now. The door slid shut behind him, leaving the 3 most powerful beings on the station alone in a silence that was louder than any explosion. They were left to contemplate the terrifying new reality that humanity wasn't a bug in the galactic system. It was a feature, and they had all just finished reading the terms and conditions.